Hello, I'm Carla. The day is November 20th, 2025. Exactly 44 years ago today, my sister Joy was born. And right now, I'm here with her at her resting spot. And today felt like a good day to share my story, because Joy's such a big part of my story. I'm here on my parents' land. They came here in the 80s with 2 babies in diapers, and they pitched up a tent, and they worked the land, and they used raw material from the land to build a house with their own hands, and they grew a garden, and they hunted local deer for food. And Mom had already had 3 children and 2 or 3 miscarriages, and was content with the 3 children she had until my dad said that he wanted 1 more. And so Mom prayed to God. She said, "God, give this child unto me, and I will give this child back to you." Sorry, I'm so emotional. Sorry, not sorry. Anyway, and so I was born. And I was prayed for, conceived, born, and raised on and fed by this land. It's very dear to me. It's like my larger body. I was homeschooled, kindergarten and 1st grade. By the time I began homeschooling, all of my siblings, my older siblings, had gone off. They were grown. They went away, so I actually spent most of my childhood alone. And I decided to go to public school in the 2nd grade because I didn't like being alone. But when I was growing up, as a very small child, they were my company, my brother and my 2 sisters. Joy was 12 years older than me, and she was really the one to take care of me. I felt a closeness with her that can't be summarized in words. None of them can. None of our connections with other human beings can really be summarized in the limited languages that we have today, but when I went to public school, when I was in the 2nd grade, I felt very much apart from my peers in some way. Like, I was kind of treated like I was weird, what homeschooler isn't, but I had grown up surrounded by what Anastasia terms as God's living thoughts. The land, food from the earth, animals, my family. God's dreams that were materialized. I had minimal exposure to technology, and we didn't end up getting electricity until the year 2000. I was 7 years old when we finally got electricity. So we had minimal exposure to technology, and hand pumped water from the well and heated it up on the wood stove, and only ran lights in the evening through a generator or through solar power, and took a dump in the outhouse. We were very close and connected to the land. And so when I entered what's termed the real world, the system, society, I didn't understand, really. I just looked at everybody as an equal. I wanted to be friends with everybody. And it felt like I could speak their language, but they didn't quite know how to speak mine. But anytime I did make friends, everyone always told me, Carla, I feel like I can be myself with you. It was like I knew how to hold the space for others, but then I was myself to the extent that I felt safe to do so. But I never really felt like I could be my whole self, because I felt so much. I felt so much, and I asked everybody, what do you think about these things? What do you feel? And, because by the time I was about 10 years old, by the time my parents divorced, I just felt so much sorrow. And I wanted to understand if everyone else could feel it too. And if not, then what was wrong with me? After my parents' divorce, I spent a lot of time with Joy, my older sister. I spent a lot of time at her apartment. And she'd feed me and let me watch TV and let me dress up in her clothes. And if I wanted to go to a friend's house, she would cover for me. And she was my rock, but she was a severe alcoholic. All of my older siblings were. And God, I could go on forever if I were to talk about family dynamics, but that's not why I'm here. I felt all the things that everyone seemed to be unwilling or uncomfortable to feel, and I don't blame anybody, because we weren't built to withstand such pain. I used to blame everybody for wanting to dissociate and self-medicate and just do anything they could to make the pain go away. They used to blame everybody because they just abandoned me to feel it alone. And by the time I was 17, 18, I couldn't dream of bringing a child into this world. I couldn't dream of it. It just seemed like cruelty to me. Why would I bring a soul here to suffer? Why would I do that? But it wasn't all bad. because I felt so deeply, I also felt such joy, too. You know? Such joy, especially living on this land and feeling the sun and eating wine berries planted by the hands of my parents and playing with our goats and our dog and our chickens and having my friends. I felt so, so happy when I got to be with my friends and we would go for walks or swim in the pond or climb onto the roof and watch the stars. I felt so much joy being with others, and I've realized now that I was desperately searching for some place to belong. And I think that's what I subconsciously try to create here in the world. I try to create a place of belonging because that's what I so desperately want. I thought about I just wanted the pain to end, you know? And because I had alcoholics for siblings, I didn't want to escape from my pain because I saw that they just perpetuated more pain. I felt like there was no escape from the pain except for maybe to die. So I did think about death a lot. I thought about it a lot. I yearned for it a lot. Wow, I didn't know I'd be crying this whole time. Fuck. Here we are. I remember when I was 11, I first started listening to Evanescence. And I heard the saddest song that I'd ever heard in my life, and it was Hello by Evanescence. And it made me think about what's the saddest, most tragic, most heartbreaking thing that could ever possibly happen to me in my lifetime. And I thought, it would be to lose joy. And at that point, I imagined her funeral. And the song I would sing, I was going to sing, oh God, what's his name? Leonard Cohen, his version of Hallelujah. That was her favorite song. I was going to sing that for her, but 10 years later, at her actual funeral, I wound up singing a different song. I sang, If I Ever Leave This World Alive by Flogging Molly. But really, it was after Joy committed suicide that I realized that suicide was not an option. I couldn't do that to my family. And I went through all the pain that I'd ever gone through in my life seemed extraordinarily trivial in comparison to the pain I felt when Joy passed. But it helped me realize, I suppose it saved my life. It helped me realize that I actually do want to live. I do want to be here. And if I'm going to be here, then I might as well find something that's worth living for, because like everyone else in society, I was presented with this image of how life is supposed to be. And, you know, you go to school, you receive an education, you get a job, you pay for everything, you get a family, you raise your family, you make money, you die. I don't know. So I tried to figure out what's, I just, what society presented as an image of happiness, I didn't think it was worth living for, but I decided if I was going to live, I had to find something that was worth living for, and I came to the conclusion that I wanted a child. I was like, what makes me feel happy to be here? Love. It's love. That's what makes me happy to be here. That's what makes me strong enough to withstand anything else. And so I began imagining my child. I actually, since I was 16, I dreamt about giving birth to a red-haired, blue-eyed little girl. For 15 years, I dreamt about giving birth to her. And I knew that I'd name her Bluebell after my favorite flower. So I decided I did want children. And I just went along my way, looking out for the one, the father of my child. And before Joy died, I'd had 2 relationships, and both times I dedicated all of myself to it to end up heartbroken. And after Joy died, I experienced a couple more. When I met the father of my child, I didn't quite recognize him right away. It didn't occur to me that he had red hair and blue eyes. But shortly after we spoke, we felt like soul friends, soul family. And it took me some time to decide if I was safe, if I was actually truly safe. But I felt very, very, very strongly for him. And and he felt the same for me. He had his own hesitations, as I did, as we all do after being traumatized so many times. Like, do I really want to give 100% and then get my soul ripped away from me like I did the last time? It's natural to want to protect yourself. We both had our hesitations, but we had a very, very strong pull towards each other. And we'd really only known each other for 6 months. I told him I wanted children. And when I saw him with his own son, the love that he showed his own son, that was a major deciding factor for me. Witnessing how nurturing he was. And so I told him once I made the decision that I wanted to be with him, that he was my person. One night I looked into his eyes and I said, "Give me a child." And he looked right back into mine and he said, "Okay." He said it with a lot of enthusiasm. So, our son was conceived. And I had every intention of doing what everyone else does in society. I'd have the baby, and 2 months later I'd go back to work and give him to daycare and proceed with existence. But as soon as he was born, well, I ended up being very sick during my pregnancy, which I was not prepared for. I wound up being so sick that I had to quit my job. And so that left him to cover not just his bills, but mine as well. And so this person who I was so connected with and so close with, I didn't even have to speak my mind. He just somehow understood it. I would just have a feeling and he would just respond intuitively. I didn't even really have to communicate. He just understood. Or I could whisper his name in my heart and he would just suddenly appear. I'm not even exaggerating. Suddenly this man was thrust into survival mode, having to handle double the bills that he was used to. And this man who I could just call his name in my heart and he would answer. Suddenly, now that I was pregnant with his child, he wasn't there anymore. I mean, he would come home, but mentally he wasn't there. Mentally he was always somewhere else. So toward the end of my pregnancy, I was getting nervous and sort of sad. Leaf was born. And Bruce was with me a month before he went back to work. Maybe 2 months, anyway. Whereas before, he would just answer intuitively. Now I could scream at the top of my lungs and he would not hear me. And it seemed so counterintuitive to hand my baby over to a stranger. Like, I wish I could describe my pregnancy. I don't want to make this video forever and ever, but I mean, I loved this child so much. I communicated with him in the womb, and actually everything after reading book 9, when Anastasia describes what you should do, what a woman should do when her husband's away from her during pregnancy and during childbirth, I had no idea. But I'd never read that book before, but I intuitively did those things. And anyway, it felt counterintuitive to go back to work because I needed this baby with me and he needed me with him. We were a unit. A unit isn't supposed to be separated. And I was like, okay, if I go back to work, I'm going to be paying a babysitter. I'm going to be putting most of my paycheck into someone else raising my kid, not even raising them, just watching them. I'm like, that's not worth it. That doesn't make sense. So we both agreed that he would continue to pay the bills while I stayed with Leaf. But this wasn't meant to turn into a life story, but here we are. eventually I'll get to Anastasia. I stayed with Leaf, but I was in the trenches of tsunami-like depression. Because my beloved was always gone from me. I would beg for him to come home, and he wouldn't. He would lie to me instead. I knew that society was backwards, but it wasn't until I had a child that I realized just how this society is not conducive for life. It is not supportive for life. It's to make money. It's to benefit the system, not a single human therein. And I found myself in this state where I wanted to die because I was in so much emotional pain all the time. Here was my reason for living. And he was what kept me from alleviating my pain. He was the reason I stayed strong. I don't want to go too far into detail, but because I was so depressed all the time, my body got very sick. I was basically chronically ill. And when Leaf was 3, I conceived another child. But I was with Leaf's dad. But I was so ill that I would not have survived. Took every medication possible to me. The healthcare system is a joke, by the way. And after every possible avenue, I was just in bed all the time, dying. And Leaf had to climb up into the cupboards and fend for himself because I couldn't get out of bed. And his dad was working. He was never home. I didn't want my family near me because they caused me so much emotional pain. And so I was just alone and dying anyway. I had to make the decision to abort a very, very loved, very, very wanted baby so that Leaf wouldn't be left motherless. And then after the abortion, I got extremely sick again, and I took an antibiotic, which made me even more sick and almost killed me. I laugh because I have to. I really don't want to. That period of my life was such hell that I really don't want to dwell on it. But I was in horrendous health, and I conceived again in less than a year, and so I lost 2 babies in less than a year the same way. And as I was burying the remains of Rain, first I lost Paul and then I lost Rain. As I was burying the remains of Rain, I said a prayer to Bluebell. I said, I want you here. And if you want to be here, then you have to show me the way. Because I'm not going through this again. With God as my witness, I will never go through this again. So you have to help me understand. And you have to lay the path before my feet. I was actually right here when I had that prayer. Right next to Joy. Shortly after I aborted Paul, my friend Samantha suggested to me a book called Anastasia, book 1 of the Ringing Cedars of Russia. And at the time I thought, that sounds like an interesting book. An interesting fiction book. I'll have to give that a read someday. But after I buried Rain, it was very, very shortly thereafter I got a pull to read the book. It was after I read the book that I understood why I had been so sick during my pregnancy, because most of the food that we consume today is not food. It's really an abomination. I remember being pregnant and trying to eat, and it was like ashes in my mouth. I remember distinctly having the feeling like I'm eating nothing. I'm eating death. That's how it felt, and that's why I was so sick. I had hyperemesis gravidarum. It was like having the stomach bug 24/7. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't drink. I almost died both times. After I read these books, well, shortly after, no, I think I just read I was in the middle of book 3. My son and I had been living with my son's dad on the road for half a year while he was truck driving, and while we were on the road, I found out that his dad had been lying to me and cheating on me and all this stuff while I'd been keeping the flame of love alive by myself. But after reading the books, I realized that it's not that he's just some piece of shit. It's just what happens to people when you don't have a space of love, and when your life is fixated on things that are soulless, like money or technology or material possessions. If you don't have a consciously created space of love, your life is devoid of meaning, and therefore you slip into oblivion. And you basically just live in survival mode. And that means you will cheat or lie or steal or kill in order to survive. You'll do all these horrible things in order to protect your own precious life. And so I made the decision to read the books out loud for him to hear, in hopes that the truth would come to him, and that he would come home to himself for the first time in his life, and that eventually he would come home to us, to people who love him very much. I didn't mean for this video to be so heavy, but that's the truth. It's not just heaviness, though. When I read these books, it's like I woke up from the Matrix, but instead of waking up from a synthetic heaven and into hell, it's like I woke up from the hell of lies that had been my life, and then I realized, wow, that's a purpose that I can actually get on board with. That's something I can actually genuinely be excited about. And so far, only 2 years after reading the books, I've met so many incredible people and souls who understand the vision. Even people who have never read the books, people are waking up. People are understanding. People are seeing through the lies and realizing this isn't fucking it. This ain't where it's at. And Maybe you women, you goddesses out there, you gods as well, if your god or your goddess has been led astray, maybe you could send him or her a chapter. I read this book out loud, knowing that my beloved would hear. And I believe that even though it's transcribed technologically, I do believe that the love is transmitted. May this help bring your beloved home to you. May it lead them to the truth sooner rather than later. The truth of their own hearts and their own souls, regardless of what people say about God. Establish your own relationship with God. With love. God does not want us to be divided. Those little tiny details that religions argue about, those are the details that divide us, and it totally defeats the purpose. I feel joy here. And Paul and Rain and all my ancestors. I have asked them to be with me. And even when I feel tremendously alone in the world, surrounded by people who don't see me or understand me because they're drowning in the abyss of their own survival, I can call on them. But I also very much look forward to the day where you and I can be neighbors. And we can embrace. And we can share food and stories and laughter. That's what keeps me holding on. The kingdom is here now. It's up to us to restore it with love and with God's living thoughts. With the Garden of Eden that we were never kicked out of. My love and gratitude is with you. Be well.